On today's Locked On Texan podcast, last to do it, first to renew it. Which current Texan is most likely to repeat previous franchise milestones?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to a Wednesday episode of the Locked On Texan podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to make sure that we shout out our everydayers. Everydayer is a cool thing, especially when you rock with the Locked On Texan podcast. A true everyday fan. We talk to you, you talk to us, we recognize you, and there is a connection. So we want to shout out everybody, the everydayers from the Himalayas. Also, shout out to my man Darren, who I met at Walmart. Recognize me from the Locked On Texas podcast. And so you guys are not fans in my eyes. You guys are family and friends. Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp, BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. And as always, I'm John Hickman, joined by none other than Sports Illustrated's own, along with being the credential media member for the Houston Rockets. And I know a lot of Rockets fans are sad out there. And the Houston Texans, Cody Davis. On today's podcast, it's important to kind of have some fun in the slow grind of the season right now. So we're going to look at the last rookie to make a Pro Bowl. And is that person on this roster again? Also, Cody, I think it's very fun to start off with looking at if there is a double-digit sack guy on this roster. There's been so many milestones that this team hasn't had the honor of reaching. But again, with the offseason additions through free agency and the draft, there are some players currently on this roster that could reach some of these achievements. Is it? If so, who are they? First up, the Houston Texans hasn't had a double-digit sack player since 2018. Of course, that is when J.J. Watt finished with 16 on the year. Cody, is there a player on the current roster that will reach double-digit sacks this season?
Yes, and his name is Jonathan Grenard. This is going to be a big year for Grenard. I know some of you guys might hear that name and think to yourself, Cody, why in the hell would you say Jonathan Grenard? Jerry Hughes led this team in sack last season, if I'm not mistaken. I believe with like 7 or 8. We know we are anticipating a very good rookie campaign from Will Anderson Jr. We know about the veterans that they have added to the defensive line unit, to the linebacking core, and I know there are several players who can have the opportunity to reach double-digit sack, but in my eyes, John, I'm going with Jonathan Grenard. The only time that he was healthy, he came fairly close, and that came during the 2021 campaign when he finished off that season with 8 sacks. And there has been 2 big knocks that we have talked about time and time again here on the Locked On Texans podcast in regards to what can we expect from Jonathan Grenard, who is, by the way, without a shadow of a doubt, I think this is the most important factor when you look at what to expect from Grenard, is he's entering his 4th season. And this could be a make or break year for him on several different occasions. If you go out there and ball for the Houston Texans, now you're looking at it from a standpoint whether or not D'Amico Ryans and general manager Nick Caserio has trust in him to extend him beyond the 2023 campaign. And if he doesn't have a future here in the city of Houston, that can also be an addition tape for him to get a significant pay raise somewhere else. And of course, if he doesn't ball out, of course, that gives the Houston Texans an opportunity to depart with him next offseason, and then he's going to have to go somewhere and try to revamp his career. But there's 2 things that we're looking at in terms of Jonathan Grenard and whether or not he's going to take that leap in year 4. That's coaching, something that you and I just finished talking about. I believe it was last year that he has never had. D'Amico Ryans is not only going to be his 3rd head coach, if I'm not mistaken, but he's also going to be his 3rd defensive coordinator. A lot of instability going on in his career so far. And of course, speaking of D'Amico Ryans, Ryans could be the best coach that he has ever had in his career. And I believe that D'Amico Ryans is going to put his players in the best positions to get the best out of his players. And one of the guys that I'm looking at that I know is going to take a leap forward under D'Amico Ryans is Jonathan Grenard. Once again, 2021 was his best season, 8 sacks. Last year, that went down to 1, but that was due to injuries. This young man has to stay healthy. He has the work ethic. He has the passion. I know him a little bit personally, not too much personally, but with the conversations I have had the privilege to have with him in the locker room, of course, off record, lets me know that young guy is committed to improving his work and improving this organization as well.
Okay, so you guys in the comments, let us know how you feel about the possibility of John Gardner being the double-digit sack man for the Houston Texans. But to answer that question, is there a player on the current roster that will reach double-digit sacks this season? My answer to that is no. I don't think this team has a bona fide sack getter on this roster right now. Jerry Hughes was the high man on the roster last season with 9, but he's gotten a year older. And on top of that, he's only hit double digits in his career one time. Fun stat, since 2000, there's been 18 rookies to eclipse 10 or more sacks in a season their rookie year. I can see Will Anderson hovering around 6.5, 8 sacks maybe, but do I see him being a sack getter in year 1? No, not for double digits. And in my notes, Cody, I mentioned I had John Gardner. Will he have a bounce back and healthy season? I think that health, it will play a big role into him even having a chance to sniff the double digits, because he had an opportunity a couple of seasons ago, and it just, health was what knocked him out from playing. I think this front 7 can still be successful for Houston, just not a primary, we need a sack guy when we're on the field. Like I've said before, I think this team will be a collective effort. I think this will be a much better unit under D'Amico Ryans. I just think everybody else will be they'll fit into a better system, and they'll be put in situations to succeed more often than not than what we've seen in the past 2 seasons. I just don't believe that there's a guy that can go out and get 10 sacks in year 1. I can see a lot of guys getting 6.5, 7 sacks. A couple of guys. I can see some guys getting, 4.5, maybe 3 sacks collectively. And this team as a unit being, when you look at the league at the end of the year, say, okay, the Texans had about 40 sacks, 45 sacks on the year. Then you got 7.5 here, 8.5 there. A couple of 3.5 that all add up to a good number, just not one dominant 10 or more sack guy.
John, how many sacks did you have Will Anderson around?
What did you say? I can see him having 6.5, 8 sacks.
6.5, 8.
And I think, by the way, I think 6.5, because he's going to have some tackles for loss in it too. I think 6.5 for a rookie year in the NFL is pretty decent.
This conversation kind of reminds me of the first year under D'Amico Ryans as a defensive coordinator for San Fran. Of course, that was the 2019 campaign, and Nick Bosa was a rookie, and he finished his rookie season with 9 sacks. However, the defensive end, I can't remember his first name, but I think his last name was Armstead. He led that team in sacks, hovering around 10 or 11 that season. And of course, there was a collective unit outside of those guys, because other defensive linemen and linebackers was hovering around somewhere between the ballpark of 4 to 8. If D'Amico Ryans, and we all expected him to do so, can replicate that, then once again, that showcase not only the growth that we're going to see out of this defense, but it does showcase that if there is somebody who can lead this team in sacks for this upcoming season, possibly it could be John Gardner, because like Armstead, Gardner is entering his veteran stage of his career. And like I mentioned, John, if you can show promise and some potential on the Lovie Smith and David Culley, there's no way in the world you could get worse under D'Amico Ryans.
Yeah, was he here for Anthony Weaver too? I think he was.
Matter of fact, he was. His rookie season was under Anthony Weaver.
Mr. Exotic had that ZA defense. at the
Man.
at the side defense.
Hey, Jonathan Grenard, Nico Collins, man, y'all have gone through it. Davis Mills too, like y'all have gone through it.
Yeah, man. It just hasn't been any stability or good foundations for that class whenever they came out, man. So can't wait to talk about the next topic. Is there a rookie Pro Bowler on this roster? This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. It's so easy to get caught up in what everyone else needs from you and never take a moment to think about what you need from yourself. But when we all spend time always giving to others, it can leave us feeling stressed out and very burnt out. Therapy can give you the tools to find more balance in your life so you can keep supporting others without leaving yourself behind. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suitable to your schedule. You just fill out the brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Visit BetterHelp.com/locked-on today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/locked-on today. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers out there in the YouTube world. Cody, Houston got some rookies on this team.
Mm-hmm.
This team may have more higher expectations for the rookies this season, and I think they do, than last season. And last season was Derek Stingley Jr., Kenyon Green, Jalen Petrie, who did make a Pro Bowl, by the way.
This was weird.
That was, and when I was looking at this topic, I was like, Jalen Petrie had 5 picks last year, was 140 tackles.
Mm-hmm.
I think he had like a sack and a half or something like that, and he did make a Pro Bowl. And that was
when you only win. That's what happens when you only win 3 games. By the way, I do want to add that as well.
I think what's my man Jamal Adams had only won a couple of games with he had a sack last year, 5 picks, fumble recovery, 147 tackles, and no Pro. He was all rookie team, but no Pro Bowl. But I think Jamal Adams was on one of those bad Jets teams.
Mm-hmm.
He made the Pro Bowl.
You're right.
So I don't know what's up with that, but when I look at this roster and who they have on the as rookies this season, looking at the last Houston Texan to make the Pro Bowl. Get ready for this, folks. Get ready for this. The last rookie to make a Pro Bowl for the Texans, 2005, Jerome Mathis made a Pro Bowl as a rookie for special teams. And I think history will repeat itself again with a rookie making the Pro Bowl for special teams. Come on down, Tank Dell. I think Tank is an explosive returner. He finds creases in great ways, knows when to use that burst that he has. Cody, you've mentioned he's been fielding punts at rookie camp so far for the past couple of days, and I think he can be special for Houston in that role. And so for those of you who are wondering when was the last time a rookie made it for special teams, Kevontae Turpin for the Dallas Cowboys made it last year in his rookie season, and he only had 300, not only because you don't get those opportunities that often, but he had 303 punt return yards, with the longest being 52 yards, and then he had 508 kick return yards, with the longest being 63. So when I look at Turpin and what he was able to do for Dallas last year, and my expectations for Tank Dell, who there isn't a rush, I don't believe, to bump him up that depth chart as a receiver, but he is an explosive weapon that you got to find ways to get the ball in his hands. I look at the return game and I say to myself, for a special teams unit that has been damn good the last couple of seasons, for some reason I can't remember his name right now, so please forgive me, but the special teams coach for Houston, he has done a great job. Frank Ross has done a great job for Houston as a coach with their special team unit. I think this is his first time he's going to have a bona fide. We talk about guys being sack getters, return yard getters, right? So somebody he can trust out there on the field to make plays in the return game. I think this will be his first time in Tank Dell. I could see Tank being a Pro Bowler this year as a rookie, as a return man.
That's really the only realistic guy that I can see, John. Of course, with this conversation, a lot of people are going to be screaming CJ Stroud. A lot of people are going to be screaming Will Anderson Jr. I don't see them making the Pro Bowl as rookies because especially at those positions, it's kind of rare. I do know the last rookie quarterback to make the Pro Bowl was Mac Jones. However, um, that was also a season where the New England Patriots kind of surprised people and still made the playoffs. Now, I know they ain't really do nothing, but you still got to give it up that Mac Jones had a very successful rookie campaign that also led to wins. Wins led to a postseason appearance. And I believe he wasn't originally selected. I believe he was the replacement for Pat Mahomes, if I'm not mistaken. And whichever
I can't
quarterback was
remember.
representing the AFC, the AFC in the Super Bowl that year, he ended up being their replacement. So, even though he wasn't originally selected, he still had an opportunity to be selected to the Pro Bowl. And of course, that quarterback has to be Pat Mahomes. No, it was Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow from Cincinnati that year. He ended up replacing him.
The Rams.
That's what it was, yeah. So he ended up replacing him, and of course, Joe Burrow played against the Rams and almost pulled off a victory there. But that was the only rookie quarterback to make it over the last couple of seasons. Will Anderson Jr., I would not be surprised if he ended up being the best player out of the 2023 draft throughout the rookie season. However, John, I think when you look at here's one thing to keep in mind about this discussion. Coach DeMeco Ryans and general manager Nick Caserio, they are not going to force CJ and Will Anderson Jr. to immediately take the reign as franchise cornerstones. Of course, we all expecting them to do so. Of course, a lot of people, including myself, we have already considered them franchise cornerstones and the major foundation that you need in order to continue
And they are
rebuilding. And they are, realistically, they are. However, the one thing that keeps playing in my mind when we have these type of conversations is Coach DeMeco Ryans and Nick and general manager Nick Caserio have both said that one is going to take time for them to get to the player that we're expecting them to be, and two, and most importantly, they're not going to place unnecessary pressure on CJ or Will Anderson Jr. entering their rookie campaign. They're not. And John, I would not be surprised if throughout training camp and throughout preseason, we are going to have discussions on whether or not these two guys are going to be starting, especially CJ. I know that sounds crazy, but we are talking about the Houston Texans. We are talking about Nick Caserio and Coach DeMeco Ryans. And both of those guys are going to take their time in determining who's going to be starting under center for the Houston Texans come week 1. It sounds crazy for us, but this is a strategy that they're looking at. They're looking at long term. They're not looking at the now. And of course, that's going to happen them being Pro Bowl selections throughout their rookie season.
One guy that I thought about mentioning, I just got to see his game at the NFL level, like all these guys, of course. I'm wondering about Juice Scruggs at the center. I think that he is stepping into a position that many rookie centers, young centers, hell, veteran centers would like to step into. I got Shaq Mason and Titus Howard on one side. We are expecting a jump from Kenyon Green, but I got Larry Tunsil on the left side. I just need to snap the ball and make sure nobody brings pressure up front, and he's able to do that at least at the collegiate level. So he is a guy that I was like, man, I don't know when I look at Juice Scruggs, and I'm waiting to see him play football at the NFL level, right? But he's a guy as a rookie. I'm just kind of like, let me at least just asterisk his name, because we may look at him mid-season and say, wow, boy, did Houston know what they were doing. They drafted that guy. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Before we close out today's show, the Houston Texans have officially signed second-round pick center Juice Scruggs. Also, the Texans have promoted college scouting coordinator Tom Hayden to director of scouting operations. Shout out to Tom. The Texans have released linebacker Jermaine Carter after signing linebacker Ian Swinson. So that's what's going on. And don't get your panties in a bunch, guys, but the Houston Texans still have rookies unsigned. CJ Stroud, Will Anderson, and Dylan Horton. Those 3 rookies have not been signed as of yet. Do not worry, of course. They're going to get signed. I think that CJ Stroud, that contract between Stroud and between Anderson, one of those contracts I think will be all guaranteed.
Should be both of them.
No,
it should be both of them because
that's too much money to sink into both of those guys.
So who are you guaranteeing and who are you not?
It's a quarterback league, man. This is a quarterback's league. But I will say this. With CJ, he's going to eventually get his money if he pans out. So maybe they fully guarantee Will Anderson. I mean, he is the player that they traded up for. But I just can't get over this being a quarterback's league. So I'm not sure, but I think one of those players will get a fully guaranteed contract.
I like, you're looking in the future by saying, if CJ pans out, he's going to get his money, and of course he will. And I know the guaranteed money. I can't imagine what the contract is going to look like for a quarterback in the next 5 years. But I do hope that he goes into if that year comes, and hopefully and prayerfully it does, in the next 4 to 5 years, when we sit here talking about what the extension of CJ is going to look like, I hope he goes in with the same mindset as Joe Burrow, man. I love what Joe said. Joe said that, of course, he's going to be the next big quarterback to get the big bag. And Joe said, it's not even about getting the money. It's about making sure that he leaves enough on the table so the Cincinnati Bengals can continue to build around him. I love that, man. So hopefully CJ could continue going into that same mindset. John, I do agree with you, though. If you look at the reality of the situation, Will Anderson Jr. is probably going to be the one prospect that's going to get the fully guaranteed as of right now, because as you just mentioned, CJ, he's going to eventually get his money. But, if I'm Nick Caserio and if I'm D'Amico Ryans, knowing what I have been through with this organization over the last couple of seasons, looking at how happy both of those guys were at the introductory press conference. You got Nick Caserio hugging CJ. You got D'Amico Ryans hugging Will, and then it vice versa. Both of those guys are happy to be in the city of Houston. You know what? Put all your eggs in one basket. Give both of them fully guaranteed deals, man. That's what I'm saying. You might as well. What do you have to lose at this point?
A lot of money. Thank you guys for checking out today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. And as always, use those same 2 thumbs, scroll over to YouTube and subscribe to the Locked On Texans YouTube page as well. Let us know, guys, of the players that you believe can reach some of these milestones. Of course, we're going to continue this for tomorrow. Has been a 1,000-yard rusher since Carlos Hyde. And Brandon Cooks was the last 1,000-yard receiver. Are those players on the roster right now to reach those milestones? So we will continue this discussion. A little fun, getting creative. So make sure you do that and stick around.
This wouldn't even be a discussion if Dameon Pierce would have stayed healthy last year. But you know what? I like the receiver discussion more importantly. But as always, you can follow me on Twitter at Cody Davis _24. Once again, that's Cody COTY DAVIS _24. If you're a Rockets fan, I'm sorry. There will be no Victor Wembanyama here in the city of Houston. However, I do believe the Houston Rockets are still in a good place. But for more on the Houston Rockets attaining the number 4 pick of the 2023 NBA draft and missing out on the so-called best prospect since LeBron James, Victor Wembanyama, please be sure to check out our colleague, Mr. Jackson Gatlin, over at Locked On Rockets for more of that. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.